everyone.
Good afternoon, Madam City Clerk.
Yes, we are actually having two meetings that were created via our Zoom webinar account, and that's why I'm here trying to help. But you're correct. It seems that the link that was provided about an hour ago would be for the public and for attendees.
Okay.
Yes, but we'll make sure that future meetings are fine, but yes.
And we probably don't really have any members. Doesn't look like we have too much interest in this meeting, huh?
No, but we do have, and
not unusual, but and okay, Dustin, you're here. We have all three members of the committee. Are we expecting anybody else before we start?
The city manager, but she said she's finishing up another meeting, so I think she may come in a bit later.
Okay, so we should just go ahead and start then, I assume. Okay, so I will go ahead and call.
Hang on one second. Let me click broadcast and then you can do that.
Oh, okay.
All right, so in 3, 2, 1, go ahead.
So when I call this meeting of the Budget Committee to order, I think I can actually see the other two members of the committee besides myself. So let the record reflect that all three members of the committee are here. Let's see. We don't have any attendees from the public. So unless one of you wants to make a public comment, seeing no one jumping up, we will move on to approval of the minutes from September 16th.
I'll move the item.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Aye. Seeing nods all around. The minutes are approved unanimously. And we will move on to item number 2, which is a review and comment on the actuarial valuation of the city's OPEB program as of June 30th, 2019. Dustin.
Great. So I've got a short presentation that we will go through tonight, and happy to answer any questions. I thought it was pretty timely to sort of bring this forward at the same time as the next item, as well as, it was, we received it in relatively recent history. And so this was the first opportunity that I had to bring it to this committee, and wanted to share, obviously, with the committee and the world. So I will share my screen now so that we can see the, let me know. Can you, oh, all right. So can you all see my screen? Wonderful.
Yes. Print the agenda.
All right. So like I mentioned, we are going to take a look at the city's most recent actuarial of the other post-employment benefit, which we all know lovingly as OPEB. This is as of June 30th, 2019, which seems, sort of out of date, but that is the most recent. Actuarials are generally a year or so behind, because they have to wait for so much information and update their variables, et cetera. So
sorry to interrupt. Before we fully begin, I'm getting a bunch of text messages that say that they cannot see the video. Are we live?
Let me confirm, Councilmember Wahab. One moment, please.
Sorry, Director Clausen.
That's okay.
Looks like some people are interested in the budget, huh?
I was gonna say there's people actually on.
Yeah.
Well, if I got in on the public link, then they but we'll see.
Yeah, are they trying to look at YouTube or are they trying to log in to Zoom?
Let me ask.
I don't even know how you would access YouTube, really. I mean, what do you do? Like Google YouTube and then look for this meeting, or?
And if there's a delay or something,
Yes. Yes, Councilmember Mayor. Nick is the person who's helping us live stream via YouTube, the YouTube channel. And he said we are live via YouTube. We are not streaming via the city website, and we are recording via Zoom. I believe Director Clausen is recording, correct?
Correct.
Recording. So tomorrow we will upload the recording of this meeting to the website, but we are not live streaming via the city website or channel 15. We're only doing it via YouTube, via the YouTube.
What is the YouTube link?
I don't even see that on the agenda.
Yeah.
Let me see if I could. One moment, please. Let me double check.
No worries.
So I'm not seeing the
Zoom.
recording light.
Yeah, I do. I see Zoom, but. Yeah, like the agenda from last night had a YouTube, a YouTube link.
Well, it is working Zoom because I just was watching. Participant and
That call is from Support Preside. They keep calling this thing called Support Preside. No, I know what it is. Think about it.
And to our city manager, your audio is coming in very low.
okay, I'm on my laptop, so I don't know. It should be.
Oh, we have an attendee. I see.
Yes, we have one. Yes.
Okay.
So, Councilmember Mayor, I was able to confirm that we are live streaming via YouTube. If people go to YouTube and type City of Hayward, that's our channel. They should be able to see it. That's the confirmation I received.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
All right.
All right. Shall we
Are we
proceed?
back? And so where were we? You were putting your screen up.
Sure.
We are on item number 2, which is to review and comment on the actuarial valuation of the city's the city's OPEB program as of June 30th, 2019. And here we are. Thank you. Take it away.
So in July, the city received its July 2020, I should say, received its June 30th, 2019 actuarial valuation from its actuary, McLeod Watts. The city completes actuary for its OPEB and actuarial valuation once every 2 years, as is required by GASB standards. These valuations, the math that goes into it is incredibly intricate, and I certainly would not consider myself an expert by any means when it comes to actuarial science and or math. They consider many things like life expectancy, the cost of future benefits, all of these crazy things that go into sort of calculating the city's ultimate liability and the valuation of the liability versus the assets. So let me see here. Why isn't this working? There we go. So here's a comparison between the previous actuarial valuation as of June 30th, 2017. We showed a funded ratio of 6%. And in the plan at that time, we had a little over 4 million in assets. We have literally exactly doubled that in 2 years in the value of the assets. We're up to 8.3 million in assets. The majority of that is contributions made by the city, as well as some contributions from members, as well as some interest and earnings of the assets that are in the plan. And as of June 30, 2019, we had a funded ratio of 10.7%. That may seem a bit ironic since the unfunded accrued liability went up, but it went up at a slower rate, if you will, than the assets that are actually in the plan now, which is good news. Obviously, it shows the results of council's strong commitment to continue working towards funding the full OPEB ARC, and really working towards a much higher level of funding, in the hopes that the plan will eventually perpetuate itself and the city won't have to contribute nearly as much to provide the benefits to those who are using them. This slide just sort of shows an idea of the demographics from the different groups who are both active participants and those who are receiving benefits. The biggest change of note in my mind is the number of retirees. As that number goes up and the number of actives goes down, even though folks are contributing towards the funding of the unfunded liability, it's not going to keep up necessarily with those that as the number of retirees go up in the plan. That sort of underscores the importance of council's commitment to continue working towards funding the ARC, getting away from what we had done in years past. And it's not, I have to say, it was not an uncommon practice for pretty much all agencies to continue to just fund the pay-go portion, because until the mid 2000s, the OPEB liability was not something that was required to report on. And so it was what some have called sort of a dirty little secret, because it wasn't on the books. People weren't aware of it. Now that folks are more aware, and certainly our council is much more active in making sure that we are working towards funding our future liabilities. The one thing I do really want to mention in the next steps is we are partnering with a vendor named GovInvest. We're going to do a trial of their actuarial software, in which we can run different scenarios so that we have the ability to look at a lot of the what ifs that we've talked about, and what that would look like over time if we were to put in, say, make a $2 million contribution, how that would impact us 10 years out, those sorts of things. And we can play with all types of different variables, looking at cost sharing, looking at what the benefit will be of contributing at or above the ARC level. And so I'm really excited to sort of get that going, looking at getting that off the ground by the first of the year. And of course, we will be bringing back and playing with it a bit more, and bringing some information to the committee and likely to council as we move forward, so that we can look at the different opportunities that we have as one-time funds come in, so that we can help to reduce the city's long-term unfunded liabilities. The other big piece is it is very clear to me and the city manager that it is council's intent to work back towards funding that ARC at mid-year or before, if at all possible, based on revenues that come in during fiscal year 2021. So we're going to continue to monitor those revenues, and essentially see, if at all possible, how we can get towards funding that ARC, even if it's not getting back towards the full contribution. Anything that we can put towards it will help to reduce the city's future liability. So we'll work on that and bring council some information and make a recommendation probably in the January timeframe. So I think that's it. So at this point, I'm happy to answer any questions that anybody might have and have a great conversation over it.
Well, we'll just, I'll ask if either of my two colleagues on the committee have any questions. We have a member of the public here. So does the member of the public wish to speak?
It's actually one of our staff members, Mayor.
Oh, okay. All right.
We'll be promoting him to a panelist shortly.
I was gonna say, I'll answer for him. He doesn't.
Okay. All right, well then, I'm going to assume that nobody wants to speak from the public on this item. And we'll ask if either of Aisha or Sarah, do you have any questions? Sarah's nodding her head, yes. So go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Can you see the raise hand thing, Mayor?
I did just open it, but because the screen is shared, I
Oh,
wouldn't
okay.
actually
We'll
see
stop
your
sharing.
name because
Stop sharing.
it's a very limited little
Sure.
square that, yeah.
No, that's fine.
Now I am. Now I will. Yeah.
Okay, it's good to know where the parameters are, so I know how to let you know whatever we need to
Now I
know.
will see the hand in the class, I think.
Okay. So thank you. Thank you for the update. I appreciate the work around having the new tools to be able to do some what if scenarios. Thinking about when the long range budget forecasting model was created, there was also that list that said, here's what our assumptions are. And so I'm wondering, as these gets built out and as conversation with our actuarials, do you think it might be realistic to have some kind of version of transparency about what is it that they're considering for these numbers? Does that make
Certainly
sense?
so. And it's actually it's in the, and this is probably too insider baseball for many, but for those who are interested in, the city does post its actuarial evaluation on its website, and it does have all of the assumptions that are made, contributions. You know, it has a ton of information. And if there are folks that are interested in it, I'm happy to sit down and have a conversation on it. You know, if those are internal folks or external folks, happy to walk through and talk through as much as I can explain about it. It's as straightforward as an actuarial can be, I would say. And so, but it is a whole lot of information, and including all of the assumptions that are included in it.
That's dynamite. I obviously didn't realize that, and thank you. And yes, I probably will take you up on going through that, unsurprisingly. But part of the reason that I raise that is also, and I know I've alluded to this in the past, but I'm going to say it again because we're talking about it. The opportunity to really sit down with CalPERS in coalition with other cities, in coalition with labor, the opportunity to really sit down and dig into what CalPERS assumptions are. For instance, they've done a lot of work around their finally starting to control their healthcare costs, which is a direct relation to what our OPEB costs are, because it's all health benefits. And so, as those savings start to come online, I think they need to be reflected in our actuarials and therefore what we have to pay. And so making sure that we're at the table when those decisions get made. The other thing is that over the next year, this isn't quite OPEB, but it is CalPERS. They're going to be evaluating their discount, their expected rate of return, as well as their some of their private equity investments. And all of those have direct ties to what our bill is, and therefore what we're trying to navigate as a city. And so I think more so than ever, this 2021 timeframe, however we can activate coalition to be at those tables and be in those conversations at the stakeholder meetings, at the board meetings, potentially one-on-one with CalPERS, either as a city or as a coalition. I think that's really important. And I know that means looking at our work plan and our strategic goals, but I'm going to throw that also in that mix for that conversation. And then the last one is, and this is not my idea, this came from one of our residents, but I think it's brilliant. So I'm going to share it, which is, so I know we have lowered our reserve policy to a 15% level during COVID. No? I'm seeing lots of head shakes. I thought we had
Not officially.
We didn't change our policy.
Say that again, Dustin?
We didn't change our policy.
No.
Referring to is GFOA came out and said, best practice has been 20%. up to this point, and they came out pretty early in the pandemic and said, okay, we understand that for most agencies, 20% is not something that's achievable given the pandemic and its unprecedented nature. So 15 is sort of the new best practices standard for the time being.
Right. Okay. That's what I was trying to say. Thank you for saying it much better than I did.
No problem.
We didn't change our own policy.
No,
Even though our
right,
reserve has fallen. But okay,
Right.
go ahead. Sorry.
right. But our expectation for a short period being 15 instead of 20. And what I am wondering about is whether or not we actually want to do that on purpose for a longer period. Not forever. I get that 20% is best practice. And so I wouldn't change our long-term policy, but whether or not we might want to consider a short-term policy, 3 years, 5 years, of maintaining this 15% cap with the commitment that any delta between 5 and 20 actually be dedicated to unfunded. So just a thought that I'm throw out there. And again, not my brainchild, but an idea that I thought was really great from one of our community members. And I think that's it for me. Thank you. And, cheers on the progress we've made on this. Thanks.
All right. Aisha, do you want to?
Thank you, Mayor. I don't have significant questions on this. I think this was pretty straightforward. You don't actually even want us to do anything. It's just an informational item, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. Just reading a lot of different things and some of the assumptions being made, there have been considerations to state that we should not have an overdependence on investment earnings and it kind of doesn't make it look as expensive as it is. So one of the questions I am asking is, what is the city relying on to fund the ARC and other liabilities?
I mean, the easy answer is contributions that are being made, from the funds. I'll put it this way: the majority of them are coming from the general fund, because that's where the majority of our employees are budgeted. But they're also coming from the other funds, essentially where folks, the funds that folks work in, the contributions made from our employee groups during bargaining have agreed to cost share in some ways. And so it's not just, we're not simply throwing some money in there and hoping it's enough. We're actively trying to manage and reduce our unfunded liabilities. And, the biggest way to do that is to make contributions towards it.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mayor. That's it.
Okay. I also, it's really good to see that number at 10%. I mean, I can remember for years and years, it was around 1%, if that, we were not funding it at all, beyond the pay go, I think, pretty much. And so kudos to staff and really to us as a council for, trying to change that. And it's up to 10% now, which is a really good thing to see. And, I'm noticing it's the second largest liability, or I guess you said employment related liability or benefit related liability, of course, to our PERS, our larger pension liability, but it is the most underfunded and has been for a long time. But I like to see us working on it. What is the actual annual, what is the amount? Is it like 3.4 million or 3.5 million of what the full funding of the ARC would be?
So the full funding of the ARC, which would include the pay-go portion, it's actually closer to 8 million. And we don't tend to talk about the pay-go portion because we have to pay it. And we don't think about it because it's just simply, it is what it is. The number that we sort of always were working towards was about 8.5 million. That includes the pay-go portion. And so it's about a little bit over 5 million towards just funding the unfunded actuarial liability.
In other words, the pay-go is only around 3 point something, and the full, if we were to fund the full ARC, we'd be paying an additional 5 million.
Correct.
Wow. And so we were going to put in 3 something this year.
I think it was actually closer to 4, and we were working towards fully funding the ARC next year, which
Yeah.
clear the council is committed to doing that. This year obviously being what it is, a very off and a strange year that we had unforeseen economic impacts from both our revenue standpoint and unexpected expenditures, making it very difficult to continue towards that commitment when at the time we adopted the budget in late June. But what was also very clear at that point, and as recent as I think 2 weeks ago, is that council is still very committed to working towards funding that full OPEB ARC next year, but also working towards making the full payment that we had budgeted for when we were doing projections in the past.
Which would be about 4 million.
Correct.
And did we make, okay, so we did not make any payment beyond the pay-go in fiscal year 2020?
We actually did. We try to make the payments at the beginning of the fiscal year.
Okay, so it's fiscal year 2021 we're talking about now.
Yeah, and I think we committed to 1 million in the budget towards funding the ARC, and then like I mentioned, as we sort of go through the year and get a better idea what revenues are going to look like, we're going to bring it back to council, let you guys we will make a recommendation, and you guys can consider that recommendation and either go with it or make your own, and say that, whatever that may be.
And so that's where, of course, this is different from, this is a trust also, but it's not one that we could use to pay the pay-go from. If
it absolutely is.
It is. Okay. So, yeah, because I was thinking about Councilmember Lamnan's suggestion about the, if we lowered our reserve expectations. I'm thinking though, I mean, we got hit with this year, and this wasn't even the thing we were kind of expecting we might get hit with. So I think we were very fortunate to have the reserve that we did, and it's going to help us get through this. So we don't, but the thing about if we do it in the 401 or the 401k, and the irrevocable trust that we just actually approved right last night or launched, and then, I mean, it could still come in handy in another really serious financial crisis by allowing us to take from it to pay the actual pension obligations, not not the OPEB. But so, yeah, I mean, if we did that, I would say we would want to put more into the irrevocable trust for the pension liability, because that could also double as some kind of a backup in the case of another really serious financial crisis.
Mm-hmm.
But it's an interesting suggestion. It's kind of like which savings account do you put the money into?
I'd say that's a great analogy.
Okay, well, I didn't have any other questions, so we can now move on to item number 3. And again, so Councilmember Wahab, you have brought this to us, and this is another idea for, perhaps, well, I think what it actually is a recommendation on sort of augmenting our financial policies that we have in place to include guidance around the cannabis tax. So go ahead, and do you want to elaborate more on that?
Yeah, and then I'm happy to kind of like discuss questions, concerns, anything like that. Primarily, I am incredibly excited to present this proposal to our Budget and Finance Committee. I definitely want us to come together and present this to the larger council as a larger team. I will say that this plan is supported by Hayward Firefighters, Police, and Alameda Labor Council. These are the same members of our staff that contribute to these unfunded liabilities and so forth. If you see in the proposal that is attached to this item, they have signed a letter saying that they support it, both our fire, police, and labor council, as mentioned. And in fact, I've also talked to business owners and residents, and many are interested in this plan moving forward and seeing what could potentially come out of this. This is a pretty straightforward, common sense fiscal policy. I will state that our city manager in our most recent budget stated that in order to avoid further cuts to staff or services, the city of Hayward must prioritize paying down the debt. The particular debt that must be prioritized is the considerable growth in employee benefit costs, particularly pension and post-employment healthcare costs, while addressing staffing to manage the increasing workloads and emerging needs in our community. I very much took her words to heart. You know, this was something that I've been talking about for, I'm going to say, many months with different stakeholders, and this was clearly needed at this time. Obviously, none of us expected COVID to strike our city or any city in this country, but it happened. I will also say that our city services are performed by hardworking Hayward employees. This is police officers, firefighters, maintenance workers, clerical staff, engineers, and so many others. Many of them have already taken serious concessions. You know, we saw over the course of several months and weeks, we saw them accept self-furloughs, foregoing the cost of living adjustment. Our leadership team has also done the same. We talked about a hiring freeze for a period of time, and there is potential for further concessions depending on how long COVID lasts and what the impacts are for an economic downturn. Now, the reason why Measure EE, or the cannabis tax, is of interest to me is because the residents of Hayward passed this by 60% roughly 4 years ago, and we barely have the industry up and going. And I know I've shared my concerns around this as well in the past when discussing cannabis. So now I do believe it's, to put it in very simple terms, it's for example, when you are given a raise, you try to live by the budget you originally had and try to save the raise that you can just for future big expenditures or things like that. So now, before the revenue is utilized for something else, before another tax measure is placed on the ballots in the future, and before any further financial concerns arise, I do believe this is the time to be disciplined and fiscally responsible with what we have and how we spend our revenue. And this can only happen through prudent fiscal policies. So I've proposed a plan to basically create a policy to allocate the new revenue source to our structural deficit, which is basically unfunded pension and OPEB liabilities, to ensure that we have a healthy general reserve that is utilized as the city's of Hayward's emergency fund, examples, COVID, disaster, economic downturns. I think we were very fortunate that Measure T passed and we had reserves to pull from to be able to kind of bankroll the city when we didn't exactly know the extent of COVID. And at the same time, I do believe that we need to actually invest proactively into Hayward's economic development efforts. Last night, I was incredibly thrilled to see a presentation, a very long presentation, in regards to so many different avenues that the city needs to look at. And that requires investment, that requires planning, that potentially requires more staffing on the city's part. And, you know, this is the time to do it. And we need to do it like it's never been done before. So I will state that I have talked to the local cannabis dispensaries in the area, in the Bay Area, and the one in Hayward. And I do believe that, you know, I just got an email that stated that we actually have another one up and running. So news there. But a single cannabis,
a dispensary or a business?
It's or to our city manager. It's
probably not. It's not the other dispensary that's in the works, right?
That one is going to planning commission shortly. So
yeah, so we're almost there, but we have one up and running. We have guaranteed roughly 3 permits on the table until we move forward. But I will say that in Hayward alone, the cannabis dispensaries are projected to be anywhere from $10 million to $15 million in revenue. Now, this is in sales alone just this year. Now, I will also say that In California, specifically in 2019, the amount of money that was generated from local and state taxes on cannabis alone was over $600 million. And that is up by 35% since 2018. We know that cannabis may have taken a dip just recently, but just speaking as of even this morning, it's projected to be about $10 million to $15 million per business, right? So
Tax
during,
revenues or just revenue?
sorry, go ahead.
10 to $15 million per business tax revenue or general revenue for the business?
General revenue.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. Let's not get our hopes high, right?
I know, that's great money. Show me.
Yeah. So roughly, based on what,
accept it.
yeah, right. Of course. So roughly with our current tax rate on cannabis, which is 6%, technically 7%, but 1% we're not using. We're using that for the Hayward Community Foundation. At 6%, this would potentially generate $1.8 million on the low end. Now, the policy that is kind of before you guys that I'm happy to take questions, concerns, and adjustments to would mean that about 1/3 or 600,000 would be invested in our unfunded liabilities, our reserves, and another 600K would be available to the city council discretion. So whatever else comes up. So $1.8 million on the low end is an incredible amount of money for us to see. And again, it's not at its full potential. So to me, this is incredibly sound policy that protects our Hayward workers, our taxpayers, and our future. It is important to understand this issue further. I was very thrilled that our city manager and I went back and forth on kind of some of the details that would make her and her staff feel comfortable with this. Again, I'm very open to input to make adjustments further. And that is why this proposal definitely needs to be approved for staff to look into this matter further. And again, as much as our city staff has been taking concessions and working to, invest where they can, we can't, it's an unsustainable model. And I definitely want to attract strong talent. And that definitely means that we need to kind of take a look at how we do our spending. So if this idea works and we see progress in our city in the coming months, literally in the coming months, we can lead the charge to make Hayward a leader for working people. And I know that other cities are actually looking at this particular concept as well. So if we adopt it, we will be leading the efforts in talking about pension in local cities.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you for the work on this. And it's really pretty similar to the policy that we currently have in place for one-time revenue, except probably for the economic development part of it. But I think otherwise, that's pretty much the policy we have in place right now for one-time unexpected revenues.
The only consideration about the one-time use of funds, which this budget committee actually did approve and did work on, and I'm very proud of, is the fact that it is for one-time use of funds, right? So, for example, a sale of a property, we're not going to sell that property,
right? One-time unexpected funds, or
So this is recurring revenue, and if we are able to make a huge dent in whatever we decide to plan in unfunded liabilities or anything else or economic development, we can adjust the policy to then fund something else. But this just puts us at a stricter standard and makes us a little bit more disciplined in where we spend our funds.
Okay, thank you. Sarah.
Thank you. So I appreciate the coalition building that happened for this, and I'm going to come back to that in a minute. But I want to build on the mayor's statement, which is that we already have this policy. The whole point of having a cannabis tax was that we looked at our checkbook and we said we don't have enough money to pay our bills. And so the cannabis tax isn't a raise. It's a good analogy that you had, but it doesn't quite apply, which is that we didn't get a raise. We are hoping for some income. And so far, all of the revenue, well, so far we don't have any revenue, but as you note in the referral, but even the projections that I've heard so far are nowhere close to the numbers that you're quoting. So I'm looking forward to seeing your numbers. I asked in whatever way is Brown Act appropriate. I'd love to see those links shared. But I think, you know, our total number is 500, Dustin, please correct me if I'm wrong on this, it's something north of $500 million. And at the best case scenario, 100,000 that we could expect from sales tax, spending any staff time actually directing this money differently than the council direction, which is already prioritizing spending down our unfunded liabilities. I don't think it's an effort that we need to undergo. That said, we absolutely do have to prioritize our unfunded as paying down our unfunded liabilities, just as Dustin mentioned in the last item. Council repeatedly gives that direction. It's in our policies, it's in our direction. I don't think we need new policy about that. What we do need to do is some of the stuff that I mentioned in the last item, and I'm open to other ideas that really get at the root of the issue. I don't think this policy does that, although it's well-intentioned. Pulling together the coalition that you've been working on to get at the root of these issues, to get at substantive change, to make those bills more affordable, to analyze the actuarials and all of the things I talked about earlier, that I can totally get behind.
Okay. Well, I do appreciate your input, and just to be clear, the one-time use funds is specifically for one-time funds. It is not for the recurring funds. The tax is a recurring fund, number one. And number two is the fact, as you stated, we don't have the funds in place, and that is the point of the policy, is that before we have the funds, that we ensure that we will utilize it the correct way. I know that we have told staff, and staff is very much aware, and I appreciate Director Clausen for acknowledging the fact that we do want to prioritize our debt. Also our city manager in regards to prioritizing our debt. It is incredibly important too. I will also say that what we have in place is not going to pull us out of this problem. As you stated, we have 500 million. I think that number needs to be actually qualified in the sense of exactly what we are paying for. Per year, on average, we roughly pay, Director Clausen, it's $8 million for the ARC payment, correct?
The full arc.
The full ARC, yes.
Yes, the full ARC for the year is 8 million. We paid 4 million this year because we decided, we need to be cautious. Now, I'm not exactly sure where you got the 100,000. As you mentioned, it's like I said, it's about $1.8 million that could potentially be utilized. And at the same time, since we decided to even pull $1 million from the reserves to work on projects regarding public safety and some of our community interest and so forth, this, as in, I'm going to say in my culture, Afghan culture, we have a saying that says, drop by drop, a river is formed. And so over the years, I think that this would make it a strong policy. And as I mentioned last night, even, I am not necessarily looking to change the landscape tonight, tomorrow, next year. I'm looking for, let's say, 20 years down the road. So that is why I think that with each particular approach that we take, so the irrevocable trust that we approved last night, that's a great step. The one-time funds, that's a great step. I do believe that this is also a step. And your idea that you mentioned, I would be very much happy to kind of add your idea to this and take it a step further. But I do believe that this needs to be vetted by staff and presented to full council.
Okay, it's a tool that will help guide what we contribute each year. Although I would say that, I think it might be a little optimistic about the revenue. And we want to contribute. We want to have a policy where we're contributing. We've already established that with the ARC. That is the other policy that we are ramping up to pay that full ARC, not just the PIGO part of it. And so we have a plan in place, and we're going to be doing that. And I mean, if COVID hadn't come along, I think we would totally be there in next year. And we may still be there or close, I think.
And
But-
Mayor, I appreciate your sentiment, definitely. I just also want to be very cautious in the sense that, you know, we're talking about, you know, the potential of this, right? We may be
Right.
re-expanding our cannabis, and I think that the potential needs to be vetted by staff. And just to highlight one thing that I do want to mention is that in the last 6 years alone, the city of Hayward has put 5 tax ballot measures per election, right? So as a total. So Measure C came in June 2014 asking for about 15 million. Measure D came in with 16 million for June 2016. Measure EE, which is this, we don't know yet, right? We're hoping for, you know, gold, but we may get silver or bronze. And Measure T was 13 million in November 2018. And this budget committee does know that Measure NN that is on the current election ballot is potentially going to bring in $3 million. So we do need to understand where we can diversify some of this revenue. And, you know, I don't think that the current models we have is sustainable. Hence why I really do want to invest in economic development as much as possible.
Okay. Yes. Well, as I was saying, it's a matter of looking at your total revenues and making a decision that you're going to pay a certain amount. And we've done that with the OPEB. I think I am supportive of continuing to look at this. And I think what you asked was that we send it back to staff to further vet. I think the best time for council to really consider this is when we are considering the 2022 budget next spring. And then we'll have a little bit more information about what we've gotten so far from this money. We'll see. That is, I don't know. I mean, I can look at that. I can look at the, oh gosh. I'm sorry. This is, never mind. Until that stops.
It happens.
I mean, I don't actually want to answer it because then I'll be talking to somebody during a meeting. Okay, sorry everybody for that. Okay, it stopped.
No
Life under Zoom. Okay, so anyway, what I'm saying is we will, staff can look at it more. We will have a better idea of next spring of what we are going to be bringing in. If we have one that has been up and running, that's basically though all fiscal 2021 revenue, right? It didn't start before June, right? Or June 30th. It was later this summer that it started up, right?
Yeah,
So
had their opening in August.
Okay, so that's all. So we'll see. Like almost a full year. Pretty much a part of the year. Or we should be able to gauge, right, Dustin? Do you think what our take for fiscal year 21 is going to be from that one?
Yeah, I think once we get into probably the January, February timeframe, we'll have a couple of quarters in which we will have an idea of what their revenues have been for the first 2 quarters of the fiscal year. Obviously, if they just open in August, it's tough to get sort of the first month of the fiscal year, but it'll at least give us an idea and a ballpark. In researching for this item, I was shocked to find out that state cannabis revenues have far exceeded, and they continue to sort of break records. And I'm speaking specifically towards the adult use cannabis revenues or retail and that specific to dispensaries. So I do think there definitely is an opportunity, one in which I didn't believe was necessarily the case, and haven't believed in the past because the revenues just haven't been there. And about a year ago, maybe a little over a year ago, that landscape has changed quite a bit, and much to my surprise. And if we do start to get businesses up and running in the city, we could definitely have much greater revenues than the paltry sort of 100 to 250,000 that we're looking at. So,
Do you know what that is? I'm sorry, I don't. It wasn't coming from me
or something.
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
just static. I don't know what Dustin, you got really garbled and staticky.
I couldn't hear it, so sorry.
Clearly, because we all were like, "Ugh."
Sorry about that.
We weren't reacting to what you were saying. Yeah, so so Aisha, does that make sense to you? That they will continue to
It
look at
does, and I do have some questions of my own that I had some difficulty finding some clear facts. If Director Clausen doesn't mind answering potentially or looking into this a little more. The ballot measure itself, in regards to where do we plan on taking the revenue? Is it also cultivation, manufacturing, and so forth? Or is it just the retail dispensaries?
It was all three.
Yeah.
It was everything. The only exclusion that I recall was that of a scientific testing facility. And we agreed that they weren't really selling a product. It was more of a service. And so applying the sales tax to it didn't make a lot of sense.
Okay. So the numbers that I have as projected potential numbers, again, even my numbers were on the low end. They were focused on the retail dispensaries. I will say that if we were to include manufacturing, cultivation, or anything like that, that is extremely a significant amount more. And I really want that highlighted also on just from a business perspective. These taxes are paid, I want to say quarterly. So the city will see a return more quickly than if we were to wait for, something else. I cannot stress how important this is because our current models are not fully sustainable. And I don't believe that staff should keep taking a loss. And why I have advocated so much that we need to review our cannabis ordinance and take a look at what else we can do and how we can expand it. So I'm looking for this as a potential of growth. And I really hope that we move forward to really make this a policy that sticks.
Let me suggest that. So you will have some idea by January or February of first and second quarter 2021. Yeah, revenues. Although we didn't, that's not going to give us a full picture since we didn't really have businesses. I'm not sure about Stone Days edibles. What kind of revenues? Right now we have two businesses, right? That's my understanding. That one that's more of a manufacturing, and then the one that just opened in August. So we don't really have a handle on. You're looking at what the average cannabis dispensary is expected to bring in.
Or you direct should be significantly higher.
But where did you get the number? Where did you get that number?
These are on projections of the cannabis companies within Hayward that have shared information.
Okay. Sometimes their expectations, they shared a lot of that with us too when they were applying for
the references.
It's again, show me the money. So, and that's what
I 100% agree with you. I will say that I have also taken a look at other people's cannabis revenue. Obviously, their ordinance is very different than ours because they've allowed for far more permits. We have restricted it. We've also made it a little bit more difficult for the businesses because we've, the 500-foot buffer in downtown alone. Director Clausen, overall, what do you think about this particular proposal?
I think it definitely has some merits to consider. I think any way that we can work to reduce our future unfunded liabilities, we absolutely should. The caveat that I'll put to it is we can't necessarily do that before we balance our checkbook entirely. And so I think it is a delicate balance. I do think it could be certainly useful, but then it could turn into a bit of a shell game. And, we have to pay this now and we committed to this. So where are we going to, sort of make things balance? But, looking at ways to make sure that we're meeting our current obligations and also reducing future obligations, you're going to have my vote every time. I think there's 6 different ways to Sunday, but certainly keeping our focus on it and making sure that we've got policy in place so that we can address these things. You're never going to have me disagree with, keeping our eyes on that prize.
And Director Clausen, I know that I brought this up to you months ago, if you remember, in one of our meetings at the end of it. I will also state that that is why, we did the 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 policy. So 1/3, 100% of this fund, of like at least 1/3 of it, completely up to council discretion. And then the other 1/3 is kind of split. So if we have a strong general reserve, the rest can either go to economic development or, however council sees fit. So I do think if you're willing to change that, I am 100% open to any suggestions you guys have as staff as well.
And just one
It's the
caveat.
council that would determine that. I'm going to ask a council member, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
city manager, let me go to, you had your hand up, right? You actually pressed the button, you had your hand up. Council member Lambton, go ahead.
Thank you. I don't want to, anyway, I'm going to, so I have an idea, not to totally cut off conversation, but an idea. I'm not seeing it in our current proposed calendar, and maybe I'm missing it, but generally we have a policy conversation around the time that we do the budget. And so we can talk about the timing of this, when we get to the next item, which is actually this calendar. But what I'm wondering is when we do that every other year or every year. So if we added back that item for this year and considered this item, and at that point maybe had more data about what are the actual returns. Maybe we look at the reserve, a temporary reserve policy. Maybe there's some other things that have bubbled up because of COVID or our financial status or whatever, but maybe we actually have a review of fiscal policies as a future agenda item. And that's where, we can revisit this idea as well as others.
Very well fit in on and looking at February, because that's when we're going to be doing our mid-year budget review and update of general fund long-range financial model. So we can see where we're projecting to be. We have to keep in mind that our first obligation is providing services for our residents, and but I mean, in any policy like this is only subject to council determination. I'm not saying it's not a good idea to have it and to look at that and to say, okay, can we do that this year? And if we can, let's do it. But council always has to, like this year, obviously we're hit with something very unexpected, but that seems to happen, maybe not quite to this degree, but it does seem to happen. But I think that would be a good place to bring this back for then to bring to council at the time we're bringing the budget to council and say, and here's what we know right now about the revenue we're getting, and here's what it would mean. And we could even, as you're saying, you're getting, we already can plug things into our long-term financial plan to see what that's doing. And you're saying that you're actually going to get software that will help you do that with our ARC funding. I would say, Aisha, and you didn't really specify about, I don't think, about which liability you were, whether it was pension or OPEB. I think I would feel better if it was put into the designated for the trust, with continuing the policy we already have of paying the full ARC. We got to do that. But then, putting it into the one that we actually can access if we, like I said, if we have an emergency, we can use it to pay our pension costs during that time.
I specifically didn't highlight exactly what we needed to do with it. And the reason for that being that I definitely want Director Clausen's input as he plays with the numbers all day. I also want council to have a little leeway as to what they need to do with the funds. I don't mind some of it going into the trust, because we obviously have $0 in it today and we need to build on that. But I also want us to kind of pay simultaneously directly as well and see what we can do. The reason why
what do you mean pay simultaneously directly?
Specifically into so we have our trust that we're saving, but as Director Clausen stated last night, it kind of has to stay there for 10, 15 years to really, produce anything for us, if you will, right? So in a year or two, we can pull directly out of it, and Director Clausen, you can jump in at any moment on this. But one of my concerns that I definitely want to raise is that even if it's a low number starting out, because again, we don't have all our businesses up and running. And to our city manager, I think you wanted to state something earlier, and I would also like you to talk a little bit about what we plan on doing with cannabis moving in winterish.
Yeah, so I just also want to be careful. The city attorney and I had a long conversation because he saw the packet and saw the referral, and his concern is that we'd be very careful not to get too specific about how this is used, because this was a general tax measure and we don't want to run afoul of that.
Yeah.
We just in any policy conversation that the council is having around this, it's got to be very, we've just got to be cautious about that, because this is a general tax that, so that's just a lens to look at through all of this.
So, and I think that any policy also is a policy. It is, we cannot bind any future council, including ourselves, we're all here next year again, to committing to do whatever with the budget because circumstances change. However, I do think, I do agree that having this in place and then looking at the specific cannabis revenue, and then saying, okay, if we follow this, if we establish this policy, if the council, this is what we would be putting in. And I would really argue for
I agree with you. I 100% agree with you. This is definitely like a very similar to our previous policies, very much clear direction to staff as to what exactly we want to do, what we want to protect, how we want to go about it. The other piece is this is a general fund tax. So we can do what we need to. If this policy, let's miraculously say that our unfunded liabilities are completely wiped out, we can change policy anytime. That is our end of day. Our job is policymakers, right? So if we needed to do an emergency policy change, we can do that. We've done it in the past. So I don't believe we will bind ourselves, but I do believe that this is incredibly important and just a stepping stone in the right direction.
It's a good way of looking at revenue and saying, okay, this particular revenue we wouldn't have had if we hadn't gotten the cannabis tax passed, and not just getting the tax passed, but allowing cannabis establishments in our city, which was very controversial.
And here's the point. The entire reason why anyone would support cannabis, right, is because we needed to get out of our debt, right? So we definitely just need to understand that and actually just make that solidified by policy.
Yeah, and I mean, our residents expect us to be providing the services, but part of providing those services is being able to pay the cost of providing them, which is actually employee, a great percent, as the city manager often loves to point out, is employee cost. And we certainly, have a policy of wanting to compensate our employees with, with comparable wages and good benefits through the CalPERS program. So I think there is that somewhat being careful about, the fact that we pass it as a general tax and we're not tying ourselves to too much. But it could be a tool that, each year when we get the budget, we do get the separate breakouts of the revenue sources and how much they've grown. And, so it would be a good thing for staff to point out that if we follow this policy, this is what we would be putting, this is what we would be taking from the revenue that we've collected from this.
So I will move the item and state that we should definitely take a look at it further and allow staff to kind of study it a little bit further and develop a stronger policy to bring back to council.
Okay. Well, refine the policy in any way.
Yes.
Councilmember Lamnan, did you want to? I saw your.
Oh, there's a motion on the floor. So.
Okay. Is there a second? Well, I'll second it. I think we can take, and so all in favor. I and you're not in favor. You're gonna vote.
And can I?
Okay, sure.
So what you just said, Mayor, we already have, right? We look at our revenue every year.
Yes.
We say, are we going to spend it? And each year, at least for the last couple of years, we've said we're going to prioritize spending on our unfunded. And haven't been maybe as dedicated about that, but I think we've gotten better and better about it. And so I really don't understand why we're spending any staff time on a policy to do what we already do. It's also the case that, I mean, what I was trying to propose was, if we actually needed more staff direction through this policy, then why don't we do that when we do our policy conversation in February, as opposed to bringing this forward as a separate item now? So anyway.
Okay. Okay. I let me clarify what the motion was actually, because my my desire was to have this come back to us on that February budget meeting when we're looking at the midterm, so we can see, we can get a better assessment of what the revenues in that category have been. And although it's only even going to be a partial half year, Stone Age Edibles might have been operating all, and we could get a couple of other industrial ones up. Is that? But anyway, we'll have more information, and it's the time when we probably do look at our policies, and we're looking at our general, long range financial model. Well, okay, but so this is. So anyway, that's why I thought that would be a good time as we're preparing to launch the 2022 fiscal year budget process, that we could get another report on whatever staff is, what they're seeing in terms of what's coming in. I think that's, I honestly think that we want to do more, but and that
I agree.
I mean, if other revenues come in higher, I mean, we will want to be funding both the, backfilling the reserve from, to get us back up to our goal, and and also funding the full arc for the OPEB, and funding the new trust that we're just establishing. So we're going to want to be looking at putting revenue in that. I would think we might even want to be looking at putting more revenue than we might do under this policy. So that's just some of the, I mean, money is fungible. Isn't that a principle? Money, like revenue from cannabis is interchangeable with revenue from regular sales tax. But I think that's the place where we might want to continue this discussion about whether we want to put this in as a guiding policy for when we're making budget decisions, by the council.
I was just going to echo that makes some sense, because then you can look at how it relates to the other policies, and staff can do some research on this particular issue. We'll see the revenue numbers, and then the committee can make a recommendation on all of any policy changes altogether to council. So it's you're moving this forward, you're having staff research it as part of developing or revising any of the other budget policies that we have. So I think that makes some sense, because then it's in context.
And so does that meet your expectations as the maker of the motion?
Well, I don't think we got into that, the detail of the motions, right? The motion was pretty simple.
What was the motion again? Why don't you restate it?
Basically, I moved this item for staff to study this framework, provide input that they see fit, and bring it back to the council. That was kind of the gist of the
All
motion.
right, I'm gonna withdraw a second to that motion and make a motion that we have staff
Do you want to make an amendment to my motion? Because I'm fine with that.
All right, I'm gonna make amendment to your motion then, that we have further discussion about this at the February meeting, along with the other items that are on the list right now for that meeting, with any comments staff wants to add to the discussion at that time. And then we will discuss at that time what we want to do about possibly moving this forward to the full council to consider.
Yes, and
that's your motion. I'll second it.
Sure, go ahead.
All right, and Councilmember Lamnin, are you still wanting to oppose that motion?
No, that I'll support. Thank you.
All right, so then that passes with 3 votes, and we will reconsider this in February when we have a lot more information about what kind of revenue we're actually talking about, and you know, and what it would mean, and even what it would mean in terms of our liabilities. So,
and Director Clausen and to our City Manager McAdoo, or can we ensure that we also, again, this is at the very seed stage of any of the businesses in Hayward, so I just want to highlight that no matter what revenue we receive, it's at the very beginning. But then also ensure that cultivation and things like that are included. The reason why I suggest this is because I think historically all the staff reports kind of focus more on the retail piece of it as being the taxed business, and we know that that is not exactly the main concept. So if we can ensure that that is clearly laid out.
The ballot language clearly states all of the.
But the staff report is what I'm asking for, if that's clearly laid out.
I mean, we haven't had any. We haven't.
Well, you know, we talked about, so for example, when we talked about the Hayward Community Trust, which we did spend staff time to develop on a policy of just 1%. I will state that we primarily just focused more on the retail piece. We never got into depth of cultivation, manufacturing, things like that. So I just want to just be as clear as day for this particular policy.
Yeah, no, I think we all think of it in terms of the, you know, the entire cannabis industry that we've allowed, that we tax, as Dustin explained. We had that one exception, but you know, I don't know. It clearly, though, retail is where you get the big bucks, I think.
Definitely. And I will say, just as my final piece, I will say that, you know, with all of that we discussed, you know, I'm not asking for a new tax or money from anyone, simply asking for us to recognize that obviously we know that we have a problem with our unfunded liabilities and economic development and so forth. And at the end of the day, we as policymakers can do more. And this is very much a measure of good faith and a step of good faith. And all our bargaining units are watching this. So I really do appreciate the support on this, and hopefully we move it forward.
Yeah, well, thank you for thinking about that and thinking it through. And you know, and it is true that as the more we can do this and pay down those liabilities, the lower our premiums are, the lower, you know, I mean, we have more money each year in our general fund to spend on other things. So it is a good thing to be doing. I don't think that there is one council member who would not, you know, who would not say that this is you know, that funding our long-term liabilities is a big issue that we want to do. And I think we heard that when you heard strong direction to staff to do whatever you can to find the money to pay as much as possible of that.
And economic development, we need to spend as much.
Well, yeah, that's the piece though that you have, and you know, I have to say that let's, you know, there's another, you know, again, we're passing these taxes as general taxes, so we don't want to be, you know, we have to do that way, but you know, the intent, the one that we currently have on the ballot, should it pass, that's the one I really see as being, you know, revenue from that would be appropriately used for economic development.
The only situation is that, and I have the Measure NN, the $3 million, the transient occupancy tax is basically, we stated, to repair streets and sidewalks, 911 emergency and firefighter.
Said that about every single one of these taxes. That's every single
problem,
one,
right? So
well, yeah, but then we can look at revenue and say, well, we got this much in from the hotel tax. We ought to, you know, use some of that to do an economic development program that helps people, visitors, you know, attract visitors.
And Measure EE, the reason why economic development is important to me is because we clearly stated to assure local control and ongoing deficits. So it is in line with Measure EE. So I just want to be very frank about that as well.
Yeah, no, I think all of it is doable under as we pass the taxes. We want to be careful.
Definitely.
That we're,
and our lawyer can help with that.
Yeah. And I mean, you know, we've done that with all the taxes. We've looked at revenue and said, you know, Measure C, obviously that got directed in certain ways. So I had a conversation with the city attorney too. And you know, I feel that we can do this, but we do have to be somewhat careful about, the specificity and the direct relation to that tax revenue. But
Agreed.
okay, so with that, we can move on now to the item number 4, which is the proposed agenda, which we just talked about a little bit. Any other comments on that anybody wants to make?
I'll make one if I could, Mayor. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Thank you. So I guess part of my energy around the last item is about the need to really get at the root of it. This, continuing to raise taxes or continuing to ask for concessions, we all know, as Aisha said, does not fix the problem. It helps, but it doesn't. It adds drops to the river, but it doesn't fundamentally get us where we have to go. And I don't know how. And because we are the 3 on this committee, our ability to talk CalPERS is somewhat limited. And so I'm bringing it up here as kind of a ask for help about how do we redirect some energy, and maybe it's part of our strategic planning. Sorry, I'm doing a little thinking out loud here, so I apologize if I'm a little more scattered than I should be. Maybe it's part of our strategic planning conversation. Maybe it's a calendar item here early in the year. But there are some very specific things that CalPERS is deciding over the next year that have direct impact to our to this number, how this number gets calculated for us. And I can be more explicit if I need to be, trying to be concise at the moment. And so, how do we get at the stuff that is going to move the needle at a deep way?
That's very interesting. We're a member of CalPERS, and they obviously talk to us, right? And I know you in particular have been very, on top of it. I get some of it through involvement with the league and revenue tax. And did they have that? I had attended one of those sessions, and then I don't know what happened this year, whether they had it or tried to have it on online in an online form, or is that held in the fall usually?
It is. Yeah, I attended one of the 2 days online. And I'll give a quick example if I could. One of the big policy decisions that's coming up, one is looking at the investment returns, which will lead to the discount rate, which leads to how much we have to pay. But the other one is that they're looking at private equity investments, which have a long-term return, but a short-term negative. Every time CalPERS has a short-term negative, we get a higher bill. Even though they're a long-term investment portfolio, short-term, they come to us for more money. Those kinds of decisions, we can't just be, it can't just be me, the only elected at an event, and it can't just be the 3 of us either. It has to be,
okay.
coalition.
I want to pull us back to the item we're on.
Yes, thank you.
Future agenda item. So are you suggesting that we do this as a future agenda item?
I'm asking, does it make sense to have this as a future agenda item, or perhaps it fits somewhere else? I'm sort of asking for help about how do we
I think it is
get at
true
this.
that we could stand a little council education around this whole issue, and especially when we know we will have at least one new member next year, and possibly more. So that's not a bad idea to, I'm not really for our, well, we could start with our committee, but I see that as being something.
I would actually recommend that we maybe after the first of the year, when we do have at least the one new council member seated, that we do a work session on our unfunded liabilities with the council, just to kind of refresh everyone. We've got the new actuarial, maybe we have the actuary come and explain how this is calculated. We can talk a little bit about the process at PERS and some of the challenges. I think there's some good information that has been presented, I know, at a lot of the league conferences about the PERS decision-making process and some of the, it's been a while since we've done kind of an overarching presentation. I think,
and it would be a good time to do it.
especially as we go into the budget.
So as a semi-new council member, I would have loved that, just because I know I ask a lot of questions about our budget.
It's a very hard thing to get your head around.
Yeah, no, but I will say that there's a lot of good information out there. I know that I've brought this idea in regards to the cannabis since last October, and I know I've had these conversations with our city manager and many folks. But I will say that with CalPERS, some of the reports that they have released just this year, it significantly changes between what they said in January of 2020 to what they have said post-COVID, during COVID, if you will. So I do think that, for Councilmember Lamnan's concern, this is like incredibly large, right? I think that we're not the only party interested in dealing with this. I don't know about this budget committee, because I feel like we only have like an hour and a half that we spend, and this requires probably a significant amount of time. So I think that if our city manager, when you say a work session, do you plan on having somebody from CalPERS as well, or how do you see that play out?
Usually specific cities cannot get a CalPERS staff person to come, but we might have some ability to do that. We'll sort of see. I know Councilmember Lamnan's been very involved, so maybe she has some staff contacts at CalPERS that we could bring down. I think it might, we could also advertise it and have other cities Zoom in if they were interested in hearing. That might be a way to start to build some regional awareness and discussion.
Definitely. And I think the mayor can bring it up also in her mayor's conference, right? And then if you want to bring it up in your city manager's conference.
Yeah, we do occasionally. That's true. We could almost get a speaker maybe. We should talk about, okay, we're a little off.
Yeah, well, we can.
All I have to say is that we can't wait for the state to fix their problems.
This would be better to the whole council rather than even starting with the budget committee, I think, Councilmember Lamnan, but it's a good suggestion.
Thank you for the space to think it through. I appreciate that.
Yes, well, I think it, the rules are can be a little lax, I think. Any other, I assume that, let's see, we're gonna review our city debt. And when was your plan to actually have the budget the budget discussions at council? Were you planning on hoping to have it on the schedule you wanted to create and have us approve it by the end of May this year?
I would certainly like to get back to that, and that we'll be bringing a schedule back to probably the committee and also to the full council for their review. Getting back onto the schedule, hoping that obviously I wouldn't call this year totally normal, but certainly we've got a better idea of where we knock on wood, where we'll be in May than we did, last April, and then May, and then June. And I will say even into the beginning of the fiscal year. So we'll have to accept that this is sort of the new normal, but we can currently plan for what the at least current normal is. And we'd like to get back to that time frame, so it gives us a little bit of leeway. We can have more conversations, do some better planning. And it doesn't have to feel so rushed, and that there aren't times for conversations, questions, all of that. So
I don't know, Dustin. I mean, that's what you were planning this year, and look what happened. So I don't know. I'm a little nervous about it, but go ahead. I guess we can try again, right?
We'll give it our best shot.
Caveat all of the budget schedule with also. We will be entering into open contract negotiations with SEIU Local 21 and HAME this spring. So hopefully we'll be able to get resolution to those before we have to put the final budget together. So I'm just want to put that, we may have to have the council adopt a budget if we can't get to some resolution prior to them.
Okay, well, that's a lot to think about. And with that, unless we have any committee member or staff announcements, any?
Mayor, I actually did want to say something. I wasn't able to say it yesterday at yesterday's meeting. The resolution that you presented on, I think I want to say at the end of the meeting, regarding the League of California Cities and what they're trying to do. I do appreciate you at least acknowledging and sharing what happened, I guess what transpired. So I'm deeply disappointed that, you know, people would potentially censor folks. But I do appreciate you just sharing that and giving us feedback on that.
Well, it was a very, as I said, I think I said it was a
contentious meeting.
Word I want to say, vigorous, heated, not
robust,
well, somewhat heated. But and you could tell I was kind of writing down as people were speaking where they were from, and so a lot, you know, it seemed like the Bay Area got it, and there, you know, this lot of outer more rural areas were not, and the league is very it's not population based, it's like, you know, every city gets a delegate, where, and so and then it was disappointing that they were only like a couple votes short of, well, actually maybe it's not disappointing from our point of view, they were a couple votes short of having a quorum, so that meant that what we did wasn't actual, it didn't actually change anything. And all this is making it the league policy to lobby. I think what probably came out of this meeting more than anything was that there's a lot of division over going forward with this, but there's also a need to look at that rule and to say, you know, the social media companies do need to be a little more responsible and step up a little more as far as helping to prevent and, you know, deter crime. And so I think that I would bet that the league board is going to bet on is going to sort of, well, yeah, I guess it is off. I mean, I'm going to adjourn the meeting. We can continue.
Well, I appreciate it.
I just don't want us to get too.
Yeah, no, you're right. You're right. It's an announcement. She announced that she was interested in that, and I'm expounding on what I think is happening. And what does that have to do with revenue? Probably not a lot, you know, the budget. But anyway, I think it'll be interesting to see what the league board does, and you know.
Sorry to
and all that is to give input and lobby with Congress for whatever they end up doing. So it was kind of like a big deal over something that's not going to matter that much probably in the long run. But all right. Oh, with that, any other announcements, true announcements? All right. With that, if not, we are adjourned to dinner. Okay. Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Bye.